the level of social infrastructure, schools, houses, hospitals, roads that the world needs is going up. The standards of living are going up, and the world's ability to supply construction services is basically going down slash flatlining. Unfortunately, the gap is widening, and ultimately that drives up cost of construction, drives up cost of living. That's kind of a really big challenge, and obviously gains in productivity are critical.
Hello and welcome back. We are back to our regular scheduled programming, and we've got a cracker to get us going here. It's all about procurement. And procurement is where construction's ambitions meet reality, the point at which program, cost, risk, and quality are either protected or quietly eroded. In a market drenched in price volatility, fragmented supply chains, and rising ESG expectations, the old playbook of chasing the lowest number no longer delivers. What matters now is certainty, standardized scopes, transparent comparisons, live market intelligence, and disciplined commercial governance that travels from pre-con to handover. Digital procurement is accelerating this shift. The best teams are connecting estimating, tendering, and contract execution into a single workflow, capturing supplier performance data, tightening change control, and surfacing risks earlier enough to act upon. Done well, it lifts margins, shortens cycles, and strengthens relationships with subcontractors while giving leadership defensible, real time visibility of where value is being created or lost. So it's about time we chatted to someone who is looking to save 1 billion construction admin hours through procurement tech. And that person is Alastair Blenkin. He's the founder and CEO of Procure Pro, a construction tech company transforming procurement for main contractors. Beginning his career as a lawyer on major developments for institutional asset owners, Alastair gained expertise in high volume contracting, commercial strategy, and risk management. Frustrated by the inefficiencies he encountered, he transitioned into tech to drive meaningful change. Since founding Procure Pro, Alastair has led the company in creating an all-in-one integrated platform that has powered over 3,500 projects and growing, worth more than 38 billion. Yes, 38 billion. You heard me correct. Helping contractors procure 50% faster while saving over hundreds of years of admin time. Just to reiterate, Alice's mission is clear: to save 1 billion construction admin hours and enable the industry to deliver the social infrastructure that supports our lives. Alastair, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
Fantastic. Delighted to get you on after I had to cancel last time because I had a horrendous cold and it wouldn't make for good watching and certainly not good listening. But this isn't about me. I want to talk about procurement and yourself. I can tell by your accent you weren't born in the UK. So I'd like to reverse the intro a little bit and give you the opportunity to tell people how you've landed in this country with your organization and how that's come to be and what and why you've started it, really.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a thick Aussie accent, although I am a dual passport holder. Got a British one as well because Mum was born here. But uh,
Fantastic.
I'm the founder and CEO of Procure Pro, where been on a mission for 5 years to really solve procurement for the construction industry. So we're a COVID baby 5 years ago. Me and a good mate who'd worked in industry thought there's got to be smarter ways to procure than a whole lot of spreadsheets and
Hmm.
Word documents. And it's sort of an area that's been underserviced by tech for the construction industry. So started just at home with some butcher paper on the wall and that sort of thing. Decided we'd have a crack at this, and we've been now up to used by about half the market in Australia, and about 15 months ago moved over to the UK and seeing sort of a similar pretty similar growth trajectory across the UK and Ireland, and now sort of starting to make tracks in the Middle East and the US, which is exciting.
Wow, fantastic. I want to dive straight into topics, if you don't mind, because we've got a fair bit to cover, and I think this first topic that we will cover frames everything that we're going to talk about, really. Because when you talk about anything, when you talk about anything, everybody's got their own opinions, thoughts, and perceptions on what good is and what value actually means. But I think within procurement, that can be really misguided if you say, "Oh, we've got excellent value there." So when we're talking about procurement in construction, what does value mean? What does it look like to you?
Ultimately, I think it's, when you talk about procuring well, it's not just, how do you drive the number down as low as possible. It is really like that notion of a balanced scorecard. Are they the right subby for the job, from a main contractor's perspective? Can you, have they got the skills, the capability, the capacity, the performance, the track record, a good relationship of trust with you, and ultimately, can you get them procured on time to hit your program? Like we sort of you hear a lot. So some of the sound bites of the industry of your QS might be trying to drive a really good bargain, but they're then just losing time, and it's like at some point you might just need to pop a bit of a hit against budget, or not quite get the best commercial deal to make sure that your eyes on the prize for delivering the overall project, which is the thing that really matters.
And are you seeing a change or a shift in how the industry, I suppose more in the UK. I know you're relatively new within the UK market, but within the UK, in terms of that perception, and that the bottom line isn't always the first thing, and getting that best value. Are you seeing a bit of a more of a balance on quality and timing and project management?
Oh, look, let's be real. Everyone looks, straight to the bottom line initially
Yeah,
and knocks out a
yeah.
few. But then there is there's plenty of other factors that go into it, right? And so when you're solving a problem around procurement, which is typically a whole tangle of spreadsheets and Word documents and shared drives
Mm,
cobbled together around procurement schedules, comparisons, recommendations, supply chain information, to kind of get these large packages procured and make good decisions, there's a lot of factors to weigh up. But certainly, we've seen over the last few years uh, the workload and performance of supply chain
mm,
is the big factors, and obviously then solvency as well being a big one post COVID, which has settled down a little bit. But those sort of factors are really front of mind, and that's where I think this push to digital transformation of procurement and supply chain, we're starting to see um, understanding supply chain is a big factor in order to digitally transform. But ultimately, it's coming back to your point, Pete, which is they're trying to make decisions not just based on price, but what is
mm.
actually the best for project, the best for business decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it from a whole business perspective, it's quite easy within any business, and you hear it time and time again. Particularly, I'm a marketer, and you see it in nearly in every single business. You're fortunate if you're not in this boat, but you become this siloed department, and I think it can be quite easy to put procurement in that area of within the business. It's a siloed department that deals with the supply chain to make sure everything's running smoothly. But for me, marketing is definitely something a whole business needs to be involved in. So is procurement the same? If we want to drive change within a business and across our supply chain, is it important that other departments are involved in these decisions and part of the procurement process?
Yeah, I don't know if it's about introducing more process as opposed to just putting the right information um, at people's fingertips to make good decisions, or then a bit of
Mm,
control and visibility around it as well. As a business, so some of the really like consistent, well-known challenges across the industry you're hearing. Um, contractors who are overloading particular subbies because one project is not talking to the next, and that's pretty common. when if you're delivering a $200 million hospital, that's a mini business in itself. You don't have time to go and talk to every other 20 project team in the business. And the flip side is kind of down the supply chain. You've got subbies who get rubbed the wrong way when they get asked to quote at tender time, time again, but they don't necessarily win the jobs. And um, you know, some main contractors are, just trying to get more and more quotes into to drive a better bargain. But it's
Mhm.
not always, this kind of malicious, you know, want or need to piss off the supply chain to get a better price. It's often just a lack of um, systemization to go, well, hey, these subbies are quoting for us time and again, and are we making sure that you're not going to win every single job, but are you winning one in three jobs, and we're managing your continuity. And again, that's some of the problems that are solved by technology around transitioning this very like project-based procurement to thinking a bit more holistically around what's best for business and how to then we be strategic, with our supply chain that helps improve rather than damage relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see much of the wider supply chain and how digital transformation is impacting that by way of the organizations you work with on a day-to-day basis and your clients? Are you seeing digital transformation from both ends of the spectrum?
Oh, I mean, like we're focused on serving the contractors. I think there's certainly, if you look at the impacts down to the supply chain, there's certainly a big trend over the last 5 years around making their lives easier for the supply
Mm.
chain. So that's, there's a lot of different tech that contractors will push down to their supply chain, and it's not another login, not another sign up, a password to
Yeah.
remember, or fees to pay. So it's how do you make that more, frictionless, to make their
Mhm.
lives easier around how they engage and ultimately collaborate. Um, and you sort of see that reflected around these main contracting businesses wanting to mature and to be easier to deal with, because that does
Mm.
improve their relationships and can set themselves apart. So I think that's certainly front of mind about being easier to do business with. But then obviously sometimes the reality doesn't necessarily match the ambition.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It looks good on paper or on screen, should I say? But then in reality, you're dealing with humans at the end of the day, aren't you?
Easy to say. Obviously, you've got to put words into action, right? So,
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So you just touched upon some of the issues within the industry there, and I want to mention some of them more specifically. The first one being price volatility, which I think since you started the business, like you said, it was a COVID project. I think pricing has been here, there, and everywhere. It's so volatile, and that hasn't really changed that much, in my opinion. Um, how does that impact the contractors, and where does your type of technology help with that kind of volatility?
yeah, so suddenly, immediately post COVID, there was a really big impetus around speed to contract. So, you sign a head contract one day, it's how quickly can we sign up the
Yeah.
subcontracts? It's no longer kind of let everyone tenant clean the paperwork up later. It really is like, how can we get to contracts, to be able to lock prices in when when
Mm,
you're seeing that shorten. Certainly seeing as the worlds and projects have gotten bigger and more complex. Certainly coming to the UK, delays in procurement are really, really prevalent, and probably a bit more so than we've seen in the Southern Hemisphere. So trying to just take the effort and the work and the admin and the burden out of procurement is a big focus, not just to make people's lives easier, but also just to make the process easier and faster and mitigate against
mm,
delays, which obviously impacts price. And more broadly, Pete, we've sort of published some research around what we call the 12 problems of procurement from that contractor's perspective, and it's sort of across our thousands and thousands of conversations over the last 5 years. What are the how do you distill that right down to what are the big things that come up time and again? And so for us, this is lack of visibility, manual process, just a disconnected workflow, delays we spoke about, lack of executive reporting or insights, inconsistency, lack of scalability. supply chain, scope gaps, contracts not being signed, general avoidable errors, and then the people side, staff satisfaction. So, for those listening, if any of those resonate,
Mm.
it's not, you know, these are really common challenges that come up right across the industry. The good news is a lot of them um, can be solved as well, but it's we did shot a case study with one of our customers the other day, and the commercial director at Legacy Developments said it really well. It's like procurement's an easy, you know, process to explain on paper, but it's a hard process to go and execute. Like there's a lot of work, there's a lot of complexity, and you're doing that at scale across many trades, many projects, all under time pressure.
Yeah. I have trouble with the big shopping list every week, to be fair. So I don't envy somebody doing a £200 million project and trying to balance all the things that go into that long list of to dos. If you want to simplify things, um, it- uh, uh, one thing, another issue within the industry that seems to crop up time and time again is labor shortages. And I think ever since I've been part of this industry a long time, it's always been a factor. People have always mentioned labor shortages as being a huge factor, and particularly for contractors and then subcontractors. As we know, the industry is made up predominantly of SMEs and smaller organizations and sole traders. This labor shortage has got to impact procurement, right? It's just got to. So, uh, are you helping from that perspective? And what's your take on this labor shortage? I'm guessing it's a bit of a TLC for those subcontractors you can really rely on, right?
Yeah, I mean it's in the supply chain, it's in skilled professionals, it's right across the industry, right? I think the starting point to it is understanding that like it's driven by the macro demand for construction services, the level of social infrastructure, schools, houses, hospitals, roads that the world needs is going up. The standards of living are going up, and the world's ability to supply construction services is basically going down slash flatlining. Unfortunately, the gap is widening, and ultimately that drives up cost of construction, drives up cost of living. So that's kind of a really big challenge. And obviously, gains in productivity are critical. And we're talking to a very large organization recently as part of as part of an RFP process, and we sort of looked at their website and job openings, and um, I think it was about 40% of about 50 odd job openings were all for quantity surveyors, and that's where we can impact and positively impact some of the labor shortages. But it's a role that's in really high demand. They're not, you don't have the surveyor tree down the end of the lane where you can just keep plucking them off. Unfortunately, like in an industry where the workforce can be quite transient, going from one to the next. This poaching and recruitment just perpetuates the problem and drives up costs rather than you know dealing with the fundamental productivity problems. So what we say, from a positive aspect is uh, when our particular space is transforming procurement, so consolidating those procurement schedules, tenders, comparisons, approvals, contracts all in one place. When you consolidate all of that manual process, we see about 50% productivity gains, which if you multiply that out across a number of projects, a number of trades, you do see per organization like many thousands of hours being gained, and that relates to our vision as a business is to save the world, or mission as a business to save the world 1 billion construction admin hours, which we're well on the way to.
Yeah.
It's a big problem to solve around procurement, and really just the amount of manual labour is intense. And for us as a business, that's really significant for the world, and then also motivating to go, hey, we know every time we're getting more customers on board, more procurement tasks being digitized and automated, there's this really material impact for the world.
I think that's a huge point, and something I want to cover or go into it in a little more detail is, with most tech, you're talking, it resolves that trifecta of time, money, and resource. It impacts those three, hopefully for the better. It can also bring this air of transparency into things, although if done the other way, it can kind of paper over a whole host of things that you don't necessarily see. But if we touch upon that transparency perspective, how can technology help with things like a lowest bidder wins culture if we've got a bit more transparency across the supply chain? Can it help at all?
Yeah, I mean, like transparency is multifaceted, right? I think, in some senses that's, are we are we just focusing on last bidder or best value, and do we have, clarity and consistency around our decision making? And is that, ultimately when you procure something, it's not just about where you procure it, it's where you end up at. Um, my sort of little party trick to make a commercial director's head nod, I reckon I'm sitting at about 70 or 80%, physically reacting to the statement, is sort of, when we're demonstrating what we do at Procure Pro, you're sort of showing this tangle of spreadsheets and Word documents around where procurement's at. And we say, I look to, it's very hard to get across this fragmented process, very hard to get visibility on where things are up to, without physically picking up the phone, sending an email, or tapping on someone on the shoulder and asking where procurement's at. And at that point, yeah, they're nodding along. It resonates. And that's kind of management looking down, but it's also, there's no show transparency. It's people collaborating with each other. So in procurement, your project team all working together. It's those little like side conversations of, have you sent that tender? Where's procurement up to? That does just slow you down, and that becomes kind of death by 1,000 cuts. And it's when you remove, not all 1,000 of them, but a bunch of those cuts. We sort of describe procurement as like, it's 51% as it really does add up to, we hear 50% time savings all the time, and it's a lot of low hanging fruit for the industry. So it is just a smarter and better way of working, that ultimately gets people doing, great work, not grunt work.
Yeah, I like that. Fantastic. Nice way of framing it. Away from the time, the money, the resource, and that 50%. Is there other benefits to come along with the stuff that you provide? I'm thinking more from a carbon sustainability perspective. There's got to be some kind of play there, where if you're saving time and it's more efficient, then surely those things are gonna there's gonna be more benefit in those types of areas as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, you've seen traditionally a pretty paper-based process. Subcontracts being printed, probably a bit less of that these days, but there's still, physical recommendations being signed off, shipped around the office. You're seeing a fair bit of paper get reduced there. I think with any you know technology initiative around the construction industry, there's certainly more sustainability impact with site-based innovations, but anything that is back office, the biggest lever is around like labor and productivity. So we hear all the time, hey, what previously took us, two surveyors now takes 1.5, then it takes one. So it's about that productivity of resource and the effectiveness and ultimately scalability, as a business. So we hear all the time, hey, contractors got this growth ambitions all coming up, and it's an ambition. Maybe you're not trying to reduce headcount, but at least you're trying to
Hmm.
flatline it or reduce the need to continually pour money into recruitment and have staff turnover. So that's probably, there's a sustainability piece there, but it's also just good for the industry, good for the people in the industry to be, working smarter, whether it's with, procurement software or various other stuff. There's a real, burning need and an impetus to digitize and modernize many aspects of the construction process.
That brings me really, really nicely onto the final topic, which we've kind of got to cover, and I use this term really broadly, and that's of course AI, and AI more specifically within procurement. When you've been talking about the 50% reduction in time, and then the light bulb comes on for many people, and you start pointing out those types of numbers and figures and stats, there's got to be some kind of sweet spot where you can't reduce that time anymore, right? But when you start to consider AI, there's almost the argument that instead of doing the procurement yourself, you could almost put it on autopilot and it's done for you. Although I don't believe that we're anywhere near that, or we could ever get to that in such a human-based industry. But what's your take on AI within procurement now and into the future? And how are you using it, if at all?
I use it every 10 minutes. So,
Yeah, yeah, for
um,
sure.
look, I think if you kind of start like very, very broad and macro, like AI is changing the world and everyone sort of
Mm,
knows and accepts that. In certain injury industries, particularly in tech, you say it's you're at the tip of the spear around some of the productivity gains that are happening. Every developer is basically coding with AI, as a co-pilot, and you're seeing um, a lot of the best AI isn't job replacements. It's about how do you work really smart, with the person. So it's sort of 1+1=5, right? It's not,
mm,
just the AI does that job replacement. I think if you kind of narrow down then into the construction industry, there's very much an interest in the want and desire, but most organizations are still on the start mat, like not sure, where to focus their attention or necessarily having the skills or, the confidence or, the L&D programs sort of around it. And that's where, our views have been shaped around how can we, what we're doing in procurement, deliver really practical solutions for a very practical industry. So there might be these big visions out there of get all your data in one place, create all these agents that do all your job and all that. But if people are still, you know, operating status quo day to day, does the big vision come to reality? And so how do you almost pare that back and be really pointed and be really practical? So great example in estimating in commercial management, and right across many different organizations in the construction industry, there's a behavior of comparing quotes and typically getting quotes in different format, needing to plug numbers into Excel and reconcile them. um, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who've thrown quotes into ChatGPT and said, hey, give me a tender reconciliation. Doesn't work that well. So yeah, what we've been working on for the best part of a year and launching at the moment, is around that, AI driven auto comparison. So you can put those quotes in a spreadsheet. It's going to return a comparison at a pretty high degree of accuracy. It's not going to be perfect, of course, but ultimately it's trying to take the labor out of fiddling around, plugging numbers into spreadsheets, and getting people focusing on the details that matter. Um, the other example I'll give is around uh, pricing and access to information. So there's this behavior again across the industry where in various levels of the supply chain, people go out for quotes. They'll go out, in the main contracting space, pre-award, when they're tendering for the project, and then post-award again. And you might be going out to, a number of different subbies and getting them to price in order to give confidence that, hey, we're getting a fair deal on market price or providing negotiating leverage. So fundamentally, we view the behavior of tendering so broadly as an access to information challenge, and is there trust and reliability in the numbers that we're getting, and this is the problem that AI can solve by looking at historical or reference-based pricing. If I'm looking at, as a QS, if I'm looking at quote A and B, I've been on another project for the last 2 years, just started up a new one. I might be looking at going quote A and B and going which one's better, but they might be 20% higher, and then we're getting on another project at the same time. Do I need to go out to another three subbies, ask them to price to get that information, or do I just need to share information,
mhm,
better from what we have at our fingertips? So that's kind of this ability for AI to have very, very large volumes of data at your fingertips that you can then start to distill and bring to the surface to people's attention. Ultimately, we see a future where the behavior of tendering ideally will reduce the need to go out and to get so many subcontractors in the supply chain to price, and ultimately that will help drive towards that future of a more strategic supply chain where relationships are even more valuable, and ultimately ideally a bit less tendering and a bit more confidence around fair pricing that's
mm.
data driven.
Exciting times, Alastair. I know you're really busy, and I appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much for giving us all that knowledge and information, and just putting something into place with Procure Pro that is actually doing what it needs to do and helping the industry from a wider perspective and not just for your clients. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Pete. No, more than happy to share. We're passionate about this stuff, and yeah, we get up every day to make things happen and move the needle for the industry rather than accepting the status quo. So, if anyone's listening who gets the fire in the belly around this, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find us on our website. So, we'd love to chat with anyone who's passionate about procurement or digital transformation or AI more generally.